In the brutal chess game of 16th-century European politics, a person's worth was measured entirely by their birth. And in the year 1536, a 2-year-old girl in England was stripped of her title, declared illegitimate, and scrubbed from the royal succession. Her own father, the formidable King Henry VIII, had just beheaded her mother, Anne Boleyn. To the court, to the public, and to the foreign ambassadors plotting England's future, this little girl was worse than a political pawn. She was an embarrassment, a ghost, a nobody. Yet, 45 years later, this exact same girl would stand before her troops in armor, defying the greatest empire on earth and cementing a legacy as arguably the most powerful monarch England had ever seen. How did a child who was legally declared a bastard, hunted by her own sister, and locked in the Tower of London, survive the deadliest court in Europe to become Queen Elizabeth I? This isn't just a story of crowns and gowns. This is a masterclass in psychological survival, political genius, and the sheer force of human will. Let's unlock history. To understand Elizabeth's rise, we have to look at the wreckage of her childhood. When she was born in 1533, she wasn't welcomed with joy. She was a disappointment. Henry VIII desperately needed a male heir, and Elizabeth's birth was seen as a failure of her mother, Anne Boleyn. When Anne was executed on trumped-up charges of treason and adultery, the dynamic shifted from disappointment to active danger. Henry didn't just execute Anne, he legally annulled her marriage. By royal decree, Elizabeth was stripped of her title of princess. She was now simply the Lady Elizabeth, a bastard child with no legal right to the throne. She was sent away to Hatfield House, a cold country estate, practically forgotten. The records show her governess, Lady Bryan, had to write desperate letters to the king's ministers just to beg for money to buy Elizabeth clothes that fit, stating the child literally outgrown everything she owned. Imagine growing up in the shadow of a father who could execute your mother with the stroke of a pen. This brutal environment did something extraordinary to the young Elizabeth. It forced her to become hyper-observant. While other children played, Elizabeth studied. Under brilliant tutors like Roger Ascham, she mastered Latin, Greek, French, Italian, and Spanish. She learned the art of rhetoric, how to speak to persuade, and more importantly, how to stay silent to survive. She watched her father cycle through 4 more wives, learning a lethal lesson. In the Tudor court, love was a vulnerability, and marriage was a death sentence. When Henry VIII died in 1547, the throne went to Elizabeth's frail younger half-brother, Edward VI. But Edward's reign was short, and when he died, Elizabeth's elder half-sister took the crown. She was Mary I. History remembers her as Bloody Mary. Mary was a fierce Catholic. Elizabeth was raised Protestant. Mary saw Elizabeth not just as a religious rival, but as the living embodiment of the woman who had ruined her own mother's life, Anne Boleyn. This was the most dangerous period of Elizabeth's existence. In 1554, a Protestant rebellion broke out, led by a man named Wyatt. Though there was no proof Elizabeth was involved, Mary used it as the perfect excuse to eliminate her rival. On a cold, rainy Palm Sunday, 20-year-old Elizabeth was arrested and brought to the Tower of London, the very place her mother was executed. As she walked through Traitor's Gate, Elizabeth did something brilliant. Instead of weeping or begging, she sat down on a stone in the rain and declared to her captors, "Here landeth as true a subject, being prisoner, as ever landed at these stairs." She was projecting absolute innocence and royal dignity, even when staring death in the face.
For 2 months, Elizabeth was interrogated ruthlessly. She knew that a single misplaced word, a nod of agreement to a rebel's letter, or a sign of panic would mean the axe. But Elizabeth's rigorous education and discipline paid off. She spoke in careful, ambiguous riddles. She gave her captors absolutely nothing. Realizing that executing Elizabeth without proof would spark a massive civil war, Mary was forced to release her to house arrest. Elizabeth had outplayed the inquisitors. Before we reveal the terrifying moment Elizabeth finally took the throne and changed the world forever, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We break down the deepest, most calculated strategies of history's greatest figures every week, and you don't want to miss our next deep dive. Drop a comment below if you think you could have survived the Tudor court. Now let's get back to the story. In November 1558, the waiting game ended. Mary I died, and the nobody was suddenly the Queen of England. Elizabeth was 25 years old. She inherited a kingdom on the brink of ruin. England was bankrupt, torn apart by religious violence between Catholics and Protestants, and facing imminent invasion from France and Spain. Worse, the male-dominated parliament didn't believe a woman could rule alone. Their immediate aggressive demand was simple. She needed to marry a foreign prince or a powerful nobleman so a man could run the country. But Elizabeth understood something her advisors didn't. If she married a foreign prince, England would become a puppet state. If she married an English nobleman, it would spark a bloody civil war among jealous factions. So she crafted one of the greatest political PR campaigns in human history. She declared she was married to none other than the Kingdom of England itself. She transformed her status from an unmarried, vulnerable woman into a divine figure, the Virgin Queen, Gloriana. She used the fact that she was single as the ultimate diplomatic carrot, dangling the prospect of marriage to foreign kings for decades, keeping Spain, France, and the Holy Roman Empire from invading because they all hoped to win her hand through diplomacy. She weaponized her single status to maintain peace.
Elizabeth's internal strategy was built on moderation. Unlike her sister Mary, who burned heretics, Elizabeth famously stated she had no desire to make windows into men's souls. She established the Church of England with a middle-way approach that allowed people to hold their private beliefs as long as they were loyal to the crown. This stabilization allowed English culture to explode. This was the era of William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and global exploration by Sir Francis Drake. But the ultimate test of the nobody came in 1588. King Philip II of Spain, furious at England's Protestantism and their privateer raids on Spanish gold ships, launched the Spanish Armada, the largest, most fearsome naval fleet the world had ever seen. 130 ships, thousands of soldiers, sent to conquer England and overthrow the Queen. England was heavily outnumbered. The atmosphere was thick with panic. Elizabeth rode out to Tilbury to face her troops assembled on the coast. She didn't hide in a palace. She dressed in a white velvet gown with a silver breastplate, holding a truncheon, and she delivered one of the most iconic speeches in history. I know I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too, and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm. Through a combination of brilliant English naval tactics, using fire ships to scatter the Spanish fleet, and a devastating storm that the English dubbed the Protestant wind, the Spanish Armada was utterly destroyed. England hadn't just survived, they had defeated the greatest superpower of the age.
When Elizabeth I passed away in 1603, she left behind an England that was completely unrecognizable from the bankrupt, fractured island she had inherited. She transformed it into a global seafaring empire, a cultural powerhouse, and a unified nation. She spent her childhood being told she was irrelevant, illegitimate, and nothing. But by embracing education, mastering the art of political restraint, and outthinking every man who tried to control her, the girl they called nobody became the anchor of England's golden age. If you found this breakdown of Elizabeth's survival strategy valuable, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to keep making these deep dive historical documentaries. Let us know in the comments which historical figure you should cover next, and make sure to watch the video on your screen right now for more untold history. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.